All right, well, welcome to another Lonely Oak wine review. I'm your host, Rick Bondurant, steward as well. Thanks for joining me underneath my Lonely Oak here. Decided for a bit of change of scenery on this one. We'll probably be doing most of our tastings and reviews from this spot. A little more pleasing to the eye, and it just makes sense. So today I'm bringing you a Texas Vermentino from Duchman Family Winery. These folks are actually located pretty much just around the corner from where I am here in Driftwood, Texas. So another local group, and I'm excited to try their stuff. Vermentino is one of my favorite grapes. I first stumbled upon it out of Italy, the island of Sardinia, where it is the chief white grape, as well as on the island of Corsica there. And it's actually grown in northern Italy as well. It's largely thought of as a warm weather grape, but it does pretty well up north. However, it's known as Pegato there in Liguria, and Favorita out of Piedmont. So if you've ever had those wines, you were drinking Vermentino and didn't quite realize it. It's also widely believed to be identical to France's Roll, although not proven through DNA profiling, but most people consider it to be. So France actually has the largest plantings of the Vermentino or Roll grape. It is widely grown as well, however, in California, Virginia, and Texas, which brings us here to our Texas Vermentino. The Duchman folks, they grow 100%, or they use 100% Texas grapes, which is nice. A lot of winemakers here in the state import a lot of their juicer grapes, so it's always good to taste it from the local terroir. Like I said, they're located just around the corner, but this particular one, I don't know if it's 100% or just a partial or majority, but a large amount of these grapes come from the Bingham Vineyards up in the High Plains AVA, which is a premier grower here in the state. They were among the first to really get it going, and they grow some premier fruit, as I said. The wine region of the High Plains is actually, it's an ideal growing region for a lot of reasons. Primarily, you get those nice hot days, so that really drives that ripening, and then you get those nice cold nights, so that really preserves some of the acidity and allows them to kind of rest and do their thing, as well as some pretty solid winters that allow for full dormancy of the grapes. So it's really an ideal climate for these guys. Although with the rest of Texas, it's a very hostile environment. So getting it done here is not easy, and these folks do a good job. So a little background on Vermentino. We threw that out there as far as the Italian roots and the French roots. It does very well here in Texas because of the climate. There's a lot of parallels between some of those warmer regions of Italy, as well as southern France and things like that, although a little bit closer to Italy and Spain and that sort of thing, as I've mentioned before. So we'll go ahead and dive on in. So again, 2018 Vermentino from Duchman Family Vineyards. Once you get it in the glass, first thing you're gonna see, very true to its roots, an incredibly pale color. This one's actually fairly deep, so that kind of signifies most likely some of the warmth that it comes from. There is a bit of a green hue, which reminds me of a note I wanted to touch on. In Italy, it's not uncommon for this grape to be picked early intentionally in order to drive that acid up. So this one, right along line with that, so I'm not sure if that's where that green hue comes from. I'd be interested to find that out. I'll try to dig in more, maybe get in touch with these folks and see what I can come up with. But as you get in on the nose, as with a lot of Vermentino, this one's had a chance to warm up a little bit, so it's expressing a little more fully. But it's pretty common with Vermentino for it to be a little bit subtle. It's not one of those punchy in the face aroma grapes, but it does have a very nice aroma. This one I actually pick up a little more melon and apple, whereas in some of the Italian versions of it, I've gotten a little more floral notes. So that was kind of interesting to get off the bat. Certainly no slight to quality at all. Very bright smelling, definitely dry. So again, a lot of melon and apple characteristics. The first thing to hit you is that Vermentino acid. So this one does not disappoint in that sense. And a very beautiful, beautiful finish on it. I can't quite, yeah, that one's escaping me at the moment, but beautiful wine. Let me go ahead and consult my notes here real quick. because I think I kind of jumped around a little bit. So a nice easy body, as I said, good, great, crisp acidity. Like I said, this one's not a punchy in the face kind of grape in terms of the flavors. Where this one particularly really found its identity was with food. So I went ahead and came out of the gate with a pairing on this one. Of course, tasted it prior to that, but as we dove into the food, we had surprising results. I mean, phenomenal results. So what I paired it with actually was a pan-seared and spiced pork medallion finished with a mango slice. And I used some pretty intense spices in there. I had some African chili spices in there, as well as red pepper flakes and things like that. So it had quite a bit of spice, and I'll dive into the importance of that here in just a few. But yeah, I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. The acids cut right through that pork protein, while that initial melon flavor that was somewhat muted just skyrocketed to the forefront with that mango. It all just played beautifully together. And particularly in terms of the spiciness that I wanted to jump on, is that most people, when they're approaching spicy food, they want to go straight to a sweet wine. Not always the case. As with life, same with wine, there's always an exception to the rule. So you'll have plenty of people who will just go to that sweet or semi-sweet wine 100% of the time, and almost always white with spicy food. But you can actually chill some lighter reds and go very well, particularly with like some chili powder heavy dishes, things like that. So this one is one of those examples of a dry white that went very well with spiced food. It didn't increase the spiciness, it didn't mute it, it was beautifully elevated. And that's one note I definitely want to cover when talking about this wine, specifically with wine pairings, is that too often people think that just because something tastes good together with a wine, that it's a pairing. Personally, my belief is that a true pairing elevates both the dish as well as the wine. So you're not just singly focused on elevating that wine or vice versa. So a good example would be cheese. Everybody thinks, oh, well, cheese is an automatic pairing for wine. Not necessarily the case, because too often that cheese is so mouth coating that it completely washes out the wine. So while they taste good together, I wouldn't consider that usually a great pairing, because it's a little lopsided, and that's not what we're looking for. We want to elevate both those elements, and in this case, that is absolutely what happened. Both the flavors of the pork and the flavor of this wine just skyrocketed to the forefront, and then it became more of a punchy in the face kind of wine. So it looks like the wind is playing with my notes here. So we talked about the true pairings, we talked about how well it worked with the food, and the dry and sweet spicy. So that's pretty much all I really wanted to cover on this one. I would absolutely rate this as a foodie wine. I'm sure it would do fine in the cellar because those acids, that's going to preserve it as well. Not a terribly high alcohol content as with most whites, but you're not really looking for those big boomers. You want a nice balance. So between the acid, the alcohol, and the sugars, this is doing a very good job of that. So I'm sure it'll lay down. But in terms of a dinner party bring along, this is a definite recommendation for that, particularly for some of those lighter white meats like the pork and the chicken, of course, and then a little more oily seafood such as oysters, scallops, and things like that. So thank you all for sitting through this one, and especially thank you to Duchman for providing us with some good juice, and Bingham Vineyards as well for growing the goods. And I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be continuing this dive into Texas. Eventually we'll move into a weekly series, but right now I'm kind of doing a rapid fire, some Texas stuff, just so I can get familiar, you can get familiar, and I can kind of get some content out there and keep you guys tuning in. So we'll keep doing that for a little bit, and then we'll move on to those more international varietals and things from all over the country. So join us again underneath this beautiful oak tree here from Driftwood, Texas, in the within the hill country here, and I hope to see you again. Thanks.